The interview had ended 11 minutes ago, and David was still sitting in his car replaying every sentence he'd spoken. He remembered the pause before the interviewer said interesting instead of great. He remembered his own voice cracking slightly on the second question. He remembered the handshake. Was it too weak? Too long? He didn't know. What he did know was that his mind had already decided the outcome. Rejected. Failed. Not good enough. He hadn't received any result yet. No email, no call. Just silence. And in that silence, his thoughts had built an entire courtroom, complete with a verdict. This is what happens to so many men every single day, not defeat by circumstance, but defeat by imagination. The real event was neutral. The story David told himself was not. He wasn't reacting to what happened. He was reacting to what his mind had invented about what happened. And that raises an uncomfortable question. How much of your suffering today is coming from reality, and how much of it is coming from a version of reality you built yourself? If you've ever caught yourself doing this, turning silence into rejection, turning a mistake into a permanent identity, turning uncertainty into disaster, you already know how convincing this inner courtroom can feel. It doesn't feel like a distortion. It feels like truth. That's what makes negative thinking so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself as a lie. It disguises itself as intelligence, as caution, as realism. The ancient Stoics understood this pattern over 2,000 years ago, long before psychology gave it a name. They didn't just philosophize about it, they built practical tools to interrupt it. What follows are 10 of those tools, arranged so that each one prepares you for the next. Some of them will feel familiar. One of them will change how you see all the others. Rule 1. Separate fact from interpretation. Start with something simple. You lose a client, and within seconds your mind jumps to "I'm bad at this job." Notice what happened there. An event occurred, the loss of a client. Then instantly, an interpretation was layered on top of it, a judgment about your worth. Most people never separate the two. They experience the interpretation as if it were the event itself. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not by things themselves, but by the opinions they form about them. The event is neutral. The meaning is added by you, often without your awareness. Try this tonight. The next time something goes wrong, pause and ask, what actually happened in plain factual terms, and what did I add? You'll often find the addition is doing all the damage. But once you can separate fact from story, a harder question appears. What do you do with the facts once you see them clearly? Rule 2. Stop catastrophizing. Once you can see the bare facts, the next trap appears: catastrophizing what those facts mean for the future. A missed payment becomes "I'll lose everything." One awkward conversation becomes "they'll never respect me again." The mind doesn't stop at the present moment. It sprints toward worst-case scenarios and treats them as forecasts. Marcus Aurelius, writing privately to himself, repeatedly reminded himself to deal only with the task in front of him, not with imagined chains of disaster. The Stoic reframe is not blind optimism, it's precision. Ask yourself, what is the most likely outcome based on evidence, not fear? Write it down if you have to. Fear rarely survives being written in plain language. This single habit, demanding evidence before you believe your own worst prediction, starts to weaken the grip anxiety has on your decisions. But even accurate predictions won't help you if you still confuse events with your identity. Rule 3. Don't confuse events with identity. This is where it gets personal. Say you're passed over for a promotion. The facts are clear. Someone else got the role. But somewhere inside, a quieter and more damaging thought creeps in. I am not enough. Notice the shift. You've moved from describing an event to defining yourself. This is one of the most common sources of prolonged suffering, treating a single outcome as proof of permanent identity. A failed relationship becomes "I'm unlovable." A financial setback becomes "I'm a failure." The Stoics separated external outcomes from internal character. What happens to you is not who you are, it is simply something that happened. Have you ever noticed how quickly one bad result can rewrite your entire self-image? The Stoic response is to hold identity separate from circumstance, no matter how heavy the circumstance feels. But knowing this intellectually and actually living it under pressure are two very different challenges. Rule 4. Interrupt the spiral wisely. Here's the deeper issue. You can know all of this: facts versus interpretation, evidence versus fear, identity versus outcome, and still find yourself spiraling at 2 a.m. Why? Because most people try to fight negative thoughts with more thinking. They argue with the thought, analyze it, replay it, hoping to think their way out. But Seneca observed that the mind under pressure often needs redirection, not debate. Trying to out-argue anxiety at midnight rarely works. The mind is too tired, too reactive, too immersed in the story. Instead, the Stoic approach is to interrupt the pattern physically. Change your position, write the thought down, walk, breathe deliberately. Give the mind a different task. This isn't avoidance, it's strategic timing. Some battles aren't won through more thought, but through a change in state. And this leads to something most people never fully understand about why they keep repeating the same mental loops. By now you understand 4 real principles separating fact from story, demanding evidence, protecting your identity, and interrupting spirals wisely. But here's the deeper problem almost nobody talks about. Understanding a principle intellectually does not mean you can access it emotionally in the moment you need it most. That's why the same man who nods along to Stoic wisdom during the day still lies awake anxious at night. Knowledge and instinct are not the same thing. The next 6 principles exist to close that exact gap, turning what you know into what you actually do under pressure. If this distinction is landing for you, this is where the real training begins. Rule 5. Detach from external validation. Consider a man who spends his morning checking whether people liked his message, replayed his opinion, agreed with his choices. His mood rises and falls based on other people's reactions he cannot predict or control. This is one of the most exhausting mental habits a person can carry, outsourcing emotional stability to external validation. Epictetus drew a hard line between what is up to us and what is not. Other people's opinions, their moods, their approval, none of it is up to you. Your judgment, your effort, your response, all of it is. The practical shift is this. Before seeking approval, ask whether you're acting from genuine values or from fear of disapproval. If it's fear, pause. Real confidence isn't the absence of criticism. It's indifference to whether criticism arrives. But detaching from approval is only stable once you've faced something even more uncomfortable, the situations you actively avoid. Rule 6. Practice voluntary discomfort. Think about the meeting you keep postponing, the difficult conversation you keep rescheduling, the workout you skip because it's uncomfortable. Comfort has quietly become the default setting of modern life, and avoidance disguises itself as waiting for the right time. The Stoics practiced the opposite deliberately. They exposed themselves to controlled discomfort, plain meals, cold mornings, simple living, not out of punishment but training. The purpose was simple. If you can tolerate discomfort on purpose, you stop fearing it when it arrives uninvited. Try this week. Deliberately choose one uncomfortable action you've been avoiding and do it before you feel ready. Not recklessly, deliberately. Discomfort tolerated by choice becomes discomfort you no longer fear by accident. What are you avoiding right now that discomfort, not danger, is keeping you from? Because the next principle challenges something even more uncomfortable than action: how you see time itself. Rule 7. Remember impermanence. Most people live as though time is unlimited, treating today as a rehearsal for some better version of life that hasn't started yet. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that life is short and uncertain, and that this fact should sharpen focus rather than induce despair. This isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to correct a quiet miscalculation most people make without realizing it. If you knew with certainty that this version of your life was not permanent, would you still spend your evenings scrolling instead of building? Would you still avoid the conversation, the apology, the attempt? Impermanence isn't a reason for anxiety. It's a filter for priorities. The Stoic use of mortality wasn't morbid. It was clarifying. Tonight, ask yourself what you'd stop tolerating if you fully accepted that time is finite. That single question tends to reorganize a person's priorities faster than any productivity system. Rule 8. Respond instead of react. Now consider what happens when someone ignores everything so far: no separation between fact and story, no tolerance for discomfort, no awareness of time's limits. Life becomes a series of reactions. Someone cuts them off in traffic and their whole afternoon is ruined. A colleague's comment lingers for days. Every external event becomes an emotional hijack. This is reactivity, the opposite of Stoic discipline. The alternative is response. A small but powerful gap between stimulus and action, where judgment gets to operate before emotion takes the wheel. Seneca warned against letting anger dictate behavior, noting that the delay itself, even a few seconds, often changes the outcome entirely. Practically, this means pausing before replying, breathing before reacting, waiting before deciding. The gap is where your character actually lives. Everything reactive happens outside that gap. And this brings us to the rule that ties every previous principle together. Rule 9. Focus on virtue rather than outcome. Here is something worth remembering long after this video ends. Outcomes were never fully yours to control, but effort always was. A man can prepare perfectly for an opportunity and still lose it to circumstance. He can treat someone with total integrity and still be misunderstood. This isn't failure. This is simply the nature of a world where results depend on more than one person's actions. The Stoics placed value on virtue, the quality of your effort, honesty, and discipline, rather than on outcomes you never fully controlled to begin with. This reframe removes an enormous psychological burden. You stop measuring your worth by results you couldn't guarantee, and start measuring it by whether you showed up with integrity. Ask yourself tonight, did I act with discipline today regardless of how things turned out? That single question, repeated daily, quietly rebuilds self-respect from the inside. Rule 10. Control what is yours, release what isn't. All 9 principles converge here. Separating fact from story only matters if you're willing to act with discipline regardless of outcome. Tolerating discomfort only matters if you're using that tolerance in service of something you value. Detaching from approval only matters if you replace it with your own internal standard. The final Stoic principle is this: you are not trying to eliminate difficulty from your life, you are training your judgment, so difficulty no longer controls your emotional state. This is the thread running through everything. Control what is yours, release what isn't, and let your response, not your circumstances, define your character. Once this becomes instinct rather than theory, negative thinking loses its grip, not because life becomes easier, but because you become someone who no longer needs it to be easy. This is the actual shift the previous 9 rules were quietly building toward. Think back to David, still sitting in his car, waiting for a verdict his own mind had already written. Nothing about his outer situation has changed. But imagine him pausing instead, separating fact from fear, holding his identity steady, choosing response over reaction. The interview result is still unknown. What's different is him. Stoicism didn't remove the uncertainty. It changed what the uncertainty could do to him. That shift is available to you the next time silence starts writing its own story. Your mind will always offer you a story, whether you believe it is a choice, not a reflex. That choice repeated daily is the entire discipline of self-mastery. Real strength isn't the absence of doubt. It's the refusal to let doubt drive. If this resonated, consider subscribing to Anonymous Achiever for more of this work. And in the comments, tell me which of these 10 rules do you need most right now.